So again, doing these series now about, kind of like lessons learned, I guess you call it, from the episodes we're recording. And the idea is the whole point of this show is to help you, the early stage founder, find product market fit. And, thinking through it, I think interviewing other founders and pulling out stories and threads is a good start. I do think learning from case studies, learning from narratives is helpful. But I also figured, if I can kind of take the story, take that narrative and pull from it, 1, 2, 3 key ideas that resonate with me at least, that would just add another vantage point. That would also kind of help get some of these ideas to click, right? To really stick. I think important things are worth repeating and repeating and repeating again, because stuff is hard. This stuff is hard, and that's why most startups fail, and that's why few founders end up being, as rich as Mark Zuckerberg. Like this is a tough journey, and every little edge I think matters. So with that said, I spoke with Forma AI, the CEO of Forma AI, which is Nabil. He has an incredible story. I'm not going to summarize it here. You can listen to the episode, but let me share a few stories or ideas that really resonated. The first one's this. The first one's when you start a startup, one of the things you're going to hear over and over and over again is this idea of focus, right? And everybody from investors, advisors, startup books, whatever, everything's going to tell you have to be focused. Focused really matters. I think everybody accepts it, right? Because why wouldn't you focus? Obviously, if you unfocus, unfocusing is just, it's not good. It's clearly bad. So that's something nobody's going to do. And I remember when I was a founder, I understood, okay, focus matters. The problem is there's a huge difference between focus and insane focus. And the only way you really realize what that difference is through examples. And Nabil is the perfect one. So let me give you a few examples of things that Nabil touched on that just show what maniacal, what insane focus looks like. And it's truly insane. Like some of the stuff, I'm not saying you should do it. Like I'm not even saying they're good ideas themselves. What I am saying is they show Nabil's insane focus, and only the insanely focused survive when it comes to 0 to 1. So for example, right, like he tells me that when he started, he devoted his entire house to his startup. He said he had 20 people, no office, right? So his house was his office. He had 20 people working out of his office. Basically, the only part of his house that was his bedroom. Again, I'm not saying that's what you need to do. But his point was he was so committed to making Forma AI work. It became everything. And so he didn't even care whether he had space in his own house. The only thing he cared about was making Forma AI work. And because he was bootstrapping and he didn't have money for an office, if that meant people working out of his house, then so be it. So that's the first story. The other one is he told me that when he was, and this is pretty crazy, right? So when he was a week away from shipping to his first enterprise customer, and he gets in a car accident where this actually it's 18-wheeler hits his car. Unfortunately, nobody was hurt. Nothing seriously bad happened. Imagine that, right? Somebody hits your car, creates serious damage. You probably need to deal with it, right? You probably need to call the insurance company. You need to figure out, get the other person's information, make sure that the repairs are paid for, et cetera, et cetera. But not Nabil. Nabil just ignored it. He fully ignored it. And his thinking at the time was solving this insurance thing, getting whatever, 5K or 10K is not going to help me deliver to customers on time. And that was his thing. He was insanely focused on delivering to customers on time. So he just ignored it. And he told me even to this day, he doesn't regret it because the only thing that mattered was delivering to customers on time. It's pretty insane, but that's my point. It's insanely focused. When you're a startup, right? When you're a startup, you have very few resources. That's by definition. Just every single startup's under-resourced, undercapitalized. So if you're not truly focused, you're already dead. You're just on your way to dying because there's no way you can compete with everybody else that's inevitably in the marketplace when you're so under-resourced, unless you focus. Now, the flip side is if you actually become insanely focused, then you can unlock a superpower and you can literally walk through walls. And we talk about this a lot, right? Founders that can walk through walls. What does that really mean? What does that really look like? Here's the story. So when Nabil finally has a chance, he's selling enterprise. Enterprise is all about land and expand, right? he finally has his first expansion opportunity. So he sets up an in-person meeting with this customer who's out of Ohio. Nabil's based out of Toronto. He goes to the airport with his co-founder to find out it's in February. So he finds out that actually his flight was canceled because of weather. So whatever, he books a separate flight, pretty terrible flight for whatever it's worth. I mean, he's going from like Toronto to like LA and then taking the red eye back to Ohio. So it was going to be terrible, but whatever. He books it. He thinks it's important to like be there in person and just show the customer how determined he is. So anyways, he gets on the plane and the plane closes the gate, leaves, it's on the runway and it doesn't take off and it keeps getting delayed and delayed. And Nabil just realizes this plane is not going to make his connecting flight. He's going to miss it and then he's going to miss the meeting and he can't have it. But here's the thing, right? And just think about this. And even myself, I thought about this, right? You're in a plane, you're in the runway, the doors are closed and there's a snowstorm. What are you going to do? Like, what are you actually going to do? Nothing. I mean, too bad. You call the customer, you email the customer, you're like, sorry, I did everything I could. I tried so hard. I couldn't make it happen. Let's postpone. Let's do it virtually, whatever. But not Nabil. And that's my thing is like Nabil was so insanely focused. And this is what I mean by insanely focused is that he then took insane actions and he pleaded with a flight attendant to let him off the plane. He was so determined that she brings him to the cockpit of the plane. He pleads the pilot and the pilot is like, I've never let anybody off a plane like this. And even though it's not even for an emergency, right? It'd be one thing if he had an emergency. He has no emergency. He's literally just like, I'm late for a business meeting. And the pilot lets him off the plane. And so the next day he books a flight at like 6 a.m. Of course, he makes the meeting. And of course he closed that deal. Like, of course it was going to happen because he was so insanely focused. And that's my point. There's such a big difference between focus, which every founder you ever talk to is going to pay lip service to. And everybody you talk to is going to tell you focus matters. I'm focused, blah, blah, blah. But are they insanely focused? Are you insanely focused? Are you ignoring everything that is noise and clearly insanely focused on whatever you think matters most, right? For Nabil, it was delivering to customers on time, shipping product. I met another founder who was insanely focused on hiring A+ talent and everything he did was optimized for that. Are you taking your tiny resources and benefiting from the fact that you are a small team and that you can get fully and 100% aligned on one thing and kind of using that edge in order to walk through walls? Remember, when it comes to 0 to 1, only the insanely focused survive. So the other thing, and it's totally related, right? But I was thinking back again, like, and I go back, right? I always pull back, like from my days as a founder to these stories I'm hearing to now, kind of being on the investor side. But one of the things you realize really quickly, and I'm sure everybody listening here is already facing this, right? Like, because you're a first-time founder or early stage founder, whether you're Pete or not, it doesn't matter. Your list of things that you need to get done is way longer than the capacity you have of getting things done. Again, because you're under-resourced. And by the way, if you don't feel that way, something's wrong. Because if to any extent you're growing or you're kind of truly moving forward, you're going to have so many things to do and you will not have the number of resources needed to do them all. And what happens inevitably, and what I did and what I see founders doing all the time is you have this list, one way or another, whether it's written out or prioritized or it's in your head, doesn't really matter, but one way or another, it's kind of somewhat prioritized. And inevitably, you start crossing things off. The problem is you don't necessarily start at the top. You start with what's easiest. Like, okay, well, we need a website, get a website done. Okay, well, we need a logo, get a logo done. Okay, we need a name, get a name done. Like anything where you can feel like, okay, if I just put in the work, I'll get the output, right? You do those things. Those are actually, generally speaking, the easy things. And if you really think through your list of things that you need to do, right? There's going to be a subset of the top 1, 2, or 3 things that if you don't do those, you will die. You can do things 4 and on, like 4 to 50. You can crush all those. If you didn't get 1 to 3 done, you're dead. Flip side is you could do 1 to 3, ignore the rest, and you'll make it to the next stage. It's very important to figure that out. And the way I think about this is, the way it clicked for me like back then was, at first I thought it was kind of shades of gray. Like you go from 1 to 50 from most important to least important, but it's not. When you're going from 0 to 1, everything is either a 0 or a 1. It's either an absolute must do or it's noise. It doesn't matter at all. And that's the simplest framework I can come up with to think through the things you got to do. Is it a 0 or is it a 1? Don't be scared to ignore the things that are not truly going to move you forward so that you can devote all your time and energy to the things that must be done. Here's an example from this episode. Nabil told me that he was well into working and developing the product with his first customer before he took the time to name his company. And the way that he named his company was not because he one day thought like, okay, I should really come up with a name, like let's cross that off the list. It was literally because his co-founder said, hey, I'm like having trouble hiring developers because we don't even have a name. Like developers totally want to come work for a company whose name is like 0011234 or whatever like incorporation number was. So then he's like, okay, fine. And then they came up with a number. It's all tied in, right? Like he was insanely focused. That's why he didn't come up with a name. But at the same time, viewing things as just zeros and ones helps you dramatically prioritize. And so, at the end of the day, things are coming up with a name for most companies, unless maybe you're like some consumer brand sort of thing, often fall in the 0 category. I mean, you decide what falls in the 0, what falls in the 1. But just remember, when you're going from 0 to 1, everything is either a 0 or a 1. The last thing, and I'll touch on this quick, we talk about this a lot, through the show one way or another, is like you go out, you do some research, you find problems worth solving, you figure out how to solve them, you get really focused, you go in, you attack a niche market and whatever, you go into the market with something. And the whole point is like delivering value, right? Delivering value, a value proposition, delivering ROI. And this is especially the case. So Nabil, he was selling into enterprise customers, big customers. One of the things that's really hard to grasp in early days and to understand is like ROI is a necessary condition. I mean, if you're not pitching clear ROI, just realistically, no one's converting. But it's not enough. And one of the things that I think Nabil just understood innately, right? Like he just, for whatever reason, this just clicked for him pretty early on, whereas it didn't for me, and I know it doesn't for many other people listening, is when you're especially like a first-time founder, you have no credibility. I mean, generally speaking, startups have no credibility, but especially when you're a younger first-time founder who hasn't, had some massive exit or some massive success that you can point to, anything like that, you have no credibility. And when you're selling, especially to enterprise, you're asking somebody on the other side to take a massive risk on you. You really have to ask yourself, why are they going to do that, right? Because it's not that clear. Like the way you could look at it is, well, I have this ROI, and this is the traditional way of looking. This is how I would have looked at it, right? It's like, I have this ROI. This company's going to benefit. They'd be fools not to buy it. But the way it really works is there's some individual in that company who's got to decide, okay, I'm going to take on this startup. I'm going to champion this startup in here, and I'm going to make or break my name on the success of this startup. And from that vantage point, ROI is just not enough, because when you have no credibility, you are just a massive risk. And that's why most enterprise type customers are just going to shut the door on you. It's just not worth it for them on just like raw calculus. And so you have to do everything you can do, not just to prove and have case studies and all this good stuff that, there's going to be ROI. You have to do that. But you also have to go in with the idea that you have no credibility and you need to build credibility really quickly, and you need to be proactive about it, right? So the Nabil story was, he's pitching a solution to some enterprise customer, and the enterprise customer was like, I don't really know. You guys are a startup. I don't want to take a risk. So Nabil's like, let me prove it, right? Send me your data, and I will show you that we can, and it kind of doesn't matter. You can listen to the episode to understand the context of what exactly he was selling and all that stuff. That's not the point. The point is, he's like, give me your data, and we will show you what we can do. And so the customer gives him his data on like a Friday, and I don't know, like might have been testing him or something. And by Monday, 48 hours later, Nabil turns it around, has this like super, dense, and he still looks at the deck today. He's like still proud of the work that he did back then, right? And just showed back to the customer, look, here's what I can do. And that, it's everything about it, right? It was the drive to be like, let me prove it to you, right? It was also the speed of execution. And of course, it was also the results themselves. And all three of those things came together so that the buyer, the champion, the potential champion in this case, can be like, okay, I have reason to believe. And so the kind of concept here is just realize, if you're a early stage startup, especially if you're a first time founder, in the eyes of your customer, you have no credibility. So do everything you can to get it.